Well, hello friends, David Bose here. Hope you're all having a great day. It's so beautiful in Texas, you would not believe it. Oh, it's nice and cool, and it rained yesterday all day. I mean, it just rained and rained. It's beautiful. Well, friends, I want to get right into part 2 of the series about who is Jehovah, and who is Jesus, and who is this great dragon, and all of these things we've been talking about. I noticed that you've got a lot of questions. There's some questions have been asked. I'm going to try and get into all of that and answer a lot of that. Friends, there is something going on here that, it's so important to understand this information. And it seems like nobody in the past 2,000 years has understood it. I don't know of anybody that understands the information that we're going to go over today. I don't know of anybody. You've got some of the most widely quoted individuals that just don't understand this mythology. They don't understand the Bible. I mean, we've known that for a long time. People don't understand the Bible. We've talked about how people say they believe in God. We got millions and probably billions of people that believe in God. And what they believe in is this bearded man in the sky. So they don't know God. They have not come to know the only true divine being, which is light. They don't know the light. They certainly do not understand these parables. And I think probably the biggest reason is, though the parables were important to mankind, and over 2,000 years ago, people understood these parables probably in a lot better way. I mean, there were the mystery schools, and I think there were a lot of individuals that were taught the mysteries. So you had the Essenes and the Ebionites and the Therapeutae and all the mystery schools, and Pythagoras and Aristotle. But when you get to reading Aristotle and Plato and stuff, you realize they didn't fully grasp it even then, 600 years BC. So it appears that what they originally wrote down was something that was written down at least 1,500 years BC. You've got Moses, who wrote down this story. I believe he wrote it down authoritatively. It is a sort of a Reader's Digest version of the ancient Sumerian tablets, the Babylonian tablets, the Akkadian tablets, the Egyptian writings. When those originally were written down, they were the history of man. If you tried to write down the history of man, the history of the universe, you couldn't do it. Because where would you go back? Would you go back to 1,000 years? Would you go back to 5,000 years? Would you go back 1,000,000 years? Come on, if you're trying to incorporate all of this ancient wisdom for the benefit of man, more or less a sacred book for the benefit of man, it would have to be a book that would be amazing. Now think about it. It really is not important whether Bill went fishing with Bob and they caught 5 fish and they built a house and they lived in this part of the world and their kingdom consisted of 100,000 individuals and they had a war with these people, and none of that makes any difference. It doesn't matter. If you were trying to find out what happened in the world and you wanted to find history, first of all, it would take you years and years and years and years to read all of the history of millions of years, or even thousands of years. It might be nice to have a history like that, and I think probably histories like that exist somewhere in a tablet that we could dig up someday. But what we're interested in now is knowing why we're here, who we are. And so the original books were basically the tale of creation, or how we got here, who we came from, and why we're here. And so the original kingdom of the world was Eridu. Now think about this. Civilization had to begin somewhere. Civilization was important because before civilization happened, people were just running around with hootsie skirts getting killed by the dragons. And it was bad. They were in the forest, they were in the wilderness, they were being killed by wild animals. So they wanted to make a city-state where they could have order. So the very first city-state was the home of the gods. See, we got to go back before human beings. This is before the creation of man. And so we're trying to imagine, okay, how did the universe get here? Well, how could we know? We're humans. We wouldn't know. So they wrote a story about the essence of the universe in a mathematical formula. They did it with a parable. They said, okay, originally there was this Abzu, which was this fresh water. And then there was this other water, which was chaotic. And it was a balance between basically the yin and the yang, the good and the bad. The Abzu father was this pure living water. And this other water, the Tiamat, that's the Taw and the Ba. Now some say the Taw is the Tiamat and the Ba is the Behemoth. Because the book of Job talks about these two creatures. And, you know, this God Jehovah defeats Tiamat or the Taw or the chaos. See, Enki was the original god, as we said, who came from this Abzu, came out of order. Now, why is this supposedly the good side, the order, or the Abzu? Why is he all angry after he created all these gods? Why did he want to kill them? Well, because gods are going to progress. They're going to start creating more stuff, right? The only thing that was created so far was the gods, but the gods are going to create the world. Well, that takes a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of noise, and things are going to have to change. You let things go back to its natural order, and, you know, that doesn't have any progress, right? Nothing changes. But you're going to try and change things and make things better, then something's got to be removed. You try to make light, and you're going to get rid of darkness. You try and make order, you're going to get rid of chaos. Well, the universe, see, has a perfect harmony from the very beginning, chaos and order. That's the universe, night and day, male and female. You cannot change that. The problem is when individuals try to change the world order, because say the order doesn't like the chaos. So the order says, let's get rid of the chaos. See, that's what's happening today in the world. You got Democrats and Republicans. And one side saying, hey, we want liberalism. The other side saying, no, we want law and order. We want liberty. No, we want order. Well, you can't have one or the other. You've got to have both. You cannot be free if you do not have the ability to establish order. However, if you try to establish order on the backs of losing your freedom, then you're not going to be very happy. So this is the age-old story that started from the very beginning. It's like the point of this story is, who are we now? Where are we going in the future? Well, we've got to know what our past is, where we came from. And so the primordial chaos and the primordial order has always existed. And as soon as this order got together with chaos and brought gods into being who could create the world, well, the original order began to say, you know what, they're reorganizing everything. They're making a lot of noise, and I don't like it. Because their world order is going to destroy my order. And I was going to try and improve and create some gods, and look what they're doing. They're coming after me to kill me because somehow or another my existence threatens them. So the gods came to kill Abzu, and they got Ea, who was this firstborn son of the Abzu. And they said, you've got to kill him because he's going to kill us. So Ea puts him to sleep and kills him. And of course, once you get rid of order, now what happens? Well, you've just unleashed his wife, Tiamat, chaos. Chaos now has no restraint. Because if you get rid of the order, chaos is going to overwhelm you. What have the gods done? Well, in order to create and make a better world, they had to get rid of the original order, which unleashed the chaos. So now what are they going to do? Well, they say, Enki, you got to kill your mom now. But to get rid of chaos is a pretty tricky thing. And Enki's kind of smart, and he realizes that, well, okay, you can't really ever get rid of chaos. You've got to kind of have a good and evil in the world. You've got to have light and darkness. And so he needed to appease the gods, because otherwise they'd probably kill him. He needed to appease the gods. For one, he was part of this thing called the gods, and he wanted humans to work so that he didn't have to. The gods didn't want to do all the work. They wanted to expand and improve and make a world where they could have servants and lie under their own vine and fig tree and just live it up. They wanted to have a perfect world. So this chaos had to go. So even though it was his mother, Enki realized he had to get rid of the chaos. On the other hand, Enki realized that you couldn't really get rid of chaos entirely. All you could do is go back to the original equilibrium and make order. So Enki took over where his father left off, the order of the Abzu. Enki made his kingdom built on this Abzu, and therefore he was the holder of the me. In the Sumerian tablets it talks about the me. And it was the laws of civilization. It was the divine law that his father Abzu possessed, and it was handed on to him. He took it over, he took all the responsibilities of his father, and he became the new order. And so he was the giver of the law. Like our Bible says, Yahweh is the giver of the law. Well, in the law, you're trying to make order, and therefore in making law and order, you're trying basically to get rid of the chaos, of the dragon. The problem is that in the story, Tiamat has these 7 heads, and she's ferocious, and she's coming to kill everybody. So they've got to do something, because chaos is too big. So what happens is, as time goes on, and another god comes about that is different than all the others. And they're like, this god is great, right? I mean, this god Marduk was born from Mother Earth. And she was the virgin mother. So the virgin gives birth to this child. And they're like, this child is amazing. He's going to be the promised one who's going to save us all. He's going to get rid of the dragon. Marduk has this amazing sword, and he's got eyes all around his head. And he has this special voice, the voice that could charm a serpent, the voice that literally is the most amazing voice. It was a new thing in the world. It was consciousness, okay? And so having this vision is going to be a new thing in the world that perhaps can restrain chaos and get rid of it and further the order of civilization. So Marduk makes a deal. He says, listen, if I can kill her, you've got to make sure that you obey me. From now on, I am the supreme God. I am God and there is none else. And they say, you know what? That's a good deal. Well, after all, I mean, if the fool goes out there and gets killed, we're not going to have to obey him anymore. And if he does kill her, well, at least we get to live. And that means he's the king of the gods. He's obviously the strongest, the most powerful, and the most wise if he's able to get rid of this chaos, which is going to destroy us all. So Marduk goes in and he's got this net, and he throws it over Tiamat, and he encompasses her. He surrounds her and encapsulates her and blows into the encapsulation. And with his mouth, he blows with this sacred wind, or this voice, or this reason, and he makes a framework that surrounds and encapsulates Tiamat. So now the chaos is got boundaries. You know, you don't really kill Tiamat, right? You can never kill the chaos. What you do is you make boundaries for it. Another thing Marduk had was this sword. And after he got the net around her, he took his sword and he cut her up. And with that, he creates the world. The world came out of chaos. So her breasts were the mountains, and, you know, he took parts of her and made the sky. And so the universe was basically created now. We're getting to this actual physical universe and its harmony and how it works, being the coming of a new deity that is more powerful than all the other deities by virtue of its vision and its voice. So all the gods decide from that moment on, this is the supreme God. Well, all right, this is great. This is what the original teachings were. But let's go a little further, because we really want to understand all of this. What is this whole story about? Why is every nation on earth held on to this one story? You know, I mean, our Bible has the same exact story. It's got little pieces of it. Maybe the Sumerian tablets have other little pieces of it, like we learned yesterday in that video. we learned that there was a piece of the Garden of Eden story that we don't have in our Bibles. We're just told that there's the Garden of Eden, and God says, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we're told that there are these two cherubs that guard the way of the tree of life, and we're told that they're sent out of the garden without eating from the tree of life. But we're never told that in the interim, there's actually a time when the two angels that guard the way to the tree of life actually take them to the tree of life and offer them the tree of life. But that Adam refuses the tree of life because this god Ea Enki does not want them to have immortality. Because you see, Enki knows that these humans are going to muck up the whole system. He wants them to serve the gods. But he knows if he gives them eternal life, that's a problem. That's a huge risk. It's just like this Tiamat. You know, if you give Tiamat free reign, you let her live, well then chaos just sort of overwhelms, and then the oceans come along and wipe out the world. See, once you get rid of the Absu, the fresh water, there's no more balance. And then the world has to be flooded, and then nobody can stop it. See, this idea that Enlil is the cause of the flood. No, this is a natural disaster. It's caused by Enlil only in the sense that Enlil says, hey, we got to kill our father, Absu. We got to keep creating and making progress, because we eventually want to get to making humans. We're going to build a beautiful garden, and they're going to cultivate the garden and take care of it. And, you know, this is going to be great. See, he had a goal in mind. Problem is his idea of getting rid of the Absu, the order, just brought on the great ocean of Tiamat to flood the world. So you see, there's a lot of problems. You do one, you get another. So it's not necessarily that Enlil ever really wanted to kill all the humans. Enki didn't know everything. Remember, he was the firstborn, and as time goes on, these beings get smarter and smarter until we get to Marduk. And remember, Anu is the one who is the great father of light, who knows everything, that everything came from and comes back to. So Anu has a plan for all of this. Don't you worry, our Father in heaven knows what he's doing. And it's all written down in the parables, but you got to put them together correctly. So we've got a rivalry building between Enlil and Ea Enki. And Jehovah seems to take on different qualities that we can't quite understand which of these gods he is. This is what we want to determine. We're also going to determine who we are. You're going to find out something that'll just blow your mind here in this video. Because I'm going to just keep talking to try and explain this. If it takes me only an hour and I can get all this out, then we'll just end it there. But I probably won't be able to get it all explained in time, and we may have to do a third video. But anyway, we see that there's this rivalry. There's always two sides. Now, Anu is our Father in heaven, and he's above all, and he's in all, and he's through all. But he's got two sons that are not exactly on the same page. You got Enlil, and he's got Ea Enki. Well, Ea Enki represents the physical. He's always interested in the humans and the law and civilization and making form. And remember, Ea Enki is God over the Abzu and over the earth. Later on, he marries an earth god, and he's got power over both the earth and the sea. But Enlil is the sky god. Okay, he's a lot like Zeus. Now remember, this is the same thing that we see in the Greek mythology. You've got one god over the sky or the heavens, and one god that's over hell, and one god over the sea. So this is the same thing going on here. Enlil is over the sky. So what we find out, friends, is that they're brothers. Have you ever heard the saying that Jesus and Satan were brothers? Well, they got to be, don't they? Because, you see, our Father in heaven is the source of all. And therefore, everything that come after is the children of our Father in heaven. So therefore, Satan and Jesus are brothers. Okay, darkness and light, good and evil. There's always the two, yin and the yang. There's always the two things. So Enlil is the sky god, and so he's spiritual. And Ea Enki is the earth and the sea god, the Lord of the earth, and therefore he is physical. This kind of thing goes on all the way through. Even in the Bible, you've got Cain and Abel. You've got Jacob and Esau, the spirit and the flesh, and they're always fighting. Even there in the Garden of Eden, before Ea Enki, you've got two serpents. Now this is very interesting. You've got Damuzi and NINGISHZIDA. Now if you look at the Sumerian and Babylonian tablets, you'll find that Dumuzi's father is Ea Enki. But NINGISZIDA's father is Enlil. Very interesting. Dumuzi goes down into hell. And later on, he's also known as Adonis. And, sometimes they spell it Tammuz. But Dumuzi, Tammuz, Adonis, it's the same god. Well, NINGISZIDA, he goes down into hell too. But NINGISZIDA has wings because his father is from the sky. And so, where Dumuzi ends up kind of screwing things up, and he doesn't really save Inanna, NINGISZIDA is able to save her because he's got wings. And of course, throughout all of the ancient writings and the stories and the histories, there was this fight between Marduk and NINGISZIDA in Egypt in the writings, and you'll find these warring gods. Well, same thing in Babylon. You've got Enlil and Ea Enki warring, two different religions. In our Bible, you've got Yahweh and Baal. So there's always the flesh and the spirit. One of NINGISZIDA's names is the Lord of the Good Tree. And the good tree, you see, is the tree of life. Legend has it in the stories that NINGISZIDA was very instrumental in helping the woman to understand. He gave her knowledge. And of course, in our Bible, you've got a serpent that tells the woman to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because he says, you will not die, but you will live forever. And of course, the God Jehovah there confirms that they were like gods after they ate. Their eyes became opened. Of course, this is the third eye in the top of your head, which is higher consciousness. And of course, the two serpents that are wound around your spine, and the seven-headed dragon and the chakras, and all of this is right there. And all of this represents the garden, which is your body, and your temple, which is the temple of the living God. The Shekinah light of our Father in heaven is in your temple in the most holy place. And all of this is very, very symbolic. So, there are two serpents. Now, if you've probably seen the caduceus with the two serpents that's wound around the staff of the caduceus. They use that in the medical field. Well, those two serpents each have a name, and one of the serpents is Dumuzi, and the other serpent is NINGISZIDA. As we said, one is the flesh and one is the spirit. And so the two serpents really are the same person, but it's the flesh and the spirit of that same being, which we all are. And every one of these beings are gods, which we all are. This is different aspects of ourself. So we all have the flesh and we have the spirit. That's why these two serpents wind around each other in a double helix. It is said that all of nature makes this same form. The DNA makes a double helix. And it's actually a symbol of the DNA, or the creation, or the plan of creation, or the plan of life. Because in life, you've got the double helix. You've got the yin and the yang, the left and the right, the up and the down, the male and the female, on and on and on. This is the blueprint of everything. And so, it guides the woman to eternal life. And she has to listen to that inner serpent. And so, the two cherubs guard the way to the tree of life. Well, you probably remember from yesterday that it's Enlil and Anu that want to give Adam immortality. This is a part of the Genesis story that's left out. We don't have it in our Bibles, but it's in the Sumerian tablets, that they're standing there in Eridu, and this Ea Enki, which is also a serpent being, he has these two serpents that stand before him, and they stand at the gate to the innermost presence of the gods. So you just see this city, Eridu, which sits on the Abzu, is the beginning of civilization. And so Ea Enki is the first of the supreme gods. Okay, he's taken the authority that was handed down from the Abzu, and it now rests upon him, and he's Lord of the gods in Eridu. This is the very first civilization that came up out of the Abzu there in the Persian Gulf, and it's the very first city right on the actual waters. And there it says in the book of Revelation that the beast stood upon the sands of the sea. And right there on the sands of the sea is the beginning of this beast. Is the beginning of this government or civilization that began, which is Eridu. And they need to find equilibrium. So they create humans so that they can till the garden and make this wonderful paradise. But humans don't have immortality. And they don't know whether to give humans immortality because who knows if they're going to become like the gods who get too noisy and start proliferating and make too much noise and start threatening the original order. You make humans and then they start threatening the original order. And then chaos comes in and floods them all and they all have to die. So Ea Enki's trying to understand what to do, but he can't figure this out. So he says, I don't think they should have immortality. I do not want them to have it. Anu and Enlil, their initial gut feeling is, yes, they will have it. And Anu grants us immortality. But Ea Enki, the trickster god, says no. And he tells Adam, don't partake of the tree of life when you go into heaven. Just don't do it. Well, there's another serpent there, and that is NINGISHZIDA. And NINGISHZIDA tells the woman, yes, this is what you need to do. You need to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that you can be wise and become like God. And not to worry, because I am NINGISHZIDA. I am the spiritual aspect of your being, and I will save you. So the prophecy began that the coming seed of the woman would save mankind. So who is Ea Enki? Well, Ea Enki's son is Dumuzi. Enlil's son is NINGISHZIDA. Let's go back to the original story of Nimrod and Semiramis and how Semiramis ends up having this baby that she claims came from nowhere because she had no sex with any human being. And if you read the story, of course, God to her was Ea Enki. So she says Ea Enki impregnates her. And miraculously, there is born this child. She's this virgin. She has this child, and the child she names Dumuzi. Well, of course, this is Dumuzi, the son of Ea Enki. And Dumuzi is the one who then is worshipped as God. But is he really? Well, Dumuzi is the flesh. And, of course, the flesh goes down into hell and marries Inanna, but isn't really able to deliver her permanently, only partially. Later on, Ea Enki grants Dumuzi to be able to come out of hell, but only part-time. In other words, he's got to be reincarnated and constantly through a cycle. He goes back to the underworld and comes back to the light. He goes back to the underworld and back to the light. So this is not a permanent immortality. This is simply an order by virtue of law and structure that doesn't really solve everything because it still makes people unhappy. And Inanna comes back and sees Dumuzi sitting on his throne in the light, and he's not even worried about her. She's still down there in hell part of the time, and he doesn't seem to be too worried about it. So, therefore, enter NINGISHZIDA. NINGISHZIDA is the spiritual child, and he's the one who has the plan to deliver Inanna. So who is this Adonis? Who is Tammuz? Tammuz and Adonis is the same God. If you look back in the Sumerian tablets and the Akkadian tablets and the Babylonian records, you'll find that Tammuz or Dumuzi, different spellings, is also Adonis. Jehovah in the Bible, over 400 times, 434 times, is called Adonai. And it is unquestionably true that Adonai is Adonis. You see, in different languages, it has a different ending. The Canaanites worship Adon, and the Greeks and the Egyptians worship Adonis as well. And the story goes, this is Dumuzi. And this Adonis is the one who dies and is resurrected and dies and is resurrected. A lot of people get that Adoni confused with NINGISHZIDA because of this resurrection story. There's only one problem. Dumuzi does not get resurrected permanently and give everyone eternal life. He doesn't die on a cross. So he only fulfills part of the story of Jesus. Because remember, Jesus was both man and God. And Jesus came into the world and partook of flesh as did his brethren. But there's another thing going on there. Jesus is also the Christ. And when Jesus spoke to his disciples and said, I go unto my Father, and my Father is light, he was not speaking of himself as Dumuzi or Adonis, whose father is Jehovah or Ea Enki. But he is speaking to us as that NINGISHZIDA, whose father was Enlil and his grandfather was Anu. So Jesus then is the dual nature. He's the double helix of the two serpents intertwined. All of us have this DNA. We have the physical, we have the spiritual. All of us have the negative and positive. And this is what life is all about. So, Yah, in the Old Testament, calls himself Adonai 434 times. How is that possible? Well, as we said, Semiramis has a child, and that child is Dumuzi, which is, as we said, Adonai. And Dumuzi is his own father, Ea Enki. And he's born on December 25th. And so this was a great drama, or a festival, that had been taking place ever since mankind came out of the Abzu and created the very first city. After the first city, they made another city further north in today what we call Nippur. That is the Nibiru. And that is where Enlil ruled. Now remember, Enlil is from heaven in the north. See, not down there in the Abzu by the Gulf. The very first city that came up out of the Abzu as it began to evolve with the first one there, Paradise Garden, where there was equilibrium and they had just made man. Well, civilization had to grow. We had to go forward with civilization. Now you make man to till the garden, and then that brings in another element. And so you're getting rid of the Abzu, and now you've got chaos, and it floods the world, and it's on and on and on. How are you going to keep progressing and still have the equilibrium? And you've got Ea Enki ruling down here in the south at Nibiru in the garden. And you've got Enlil, the sky god, dwelling in the north in a place called Nibiru. This represents the evolution of civilization. When the gods came to the earth and they began to make civilization, they wanted to give mankind the tools to create a paradise here on earth. And they had to explain and teach us these things. So when they built the cities, they made them to replicate places in the heavens. Wherever you go in the world, whether it's here in America, with the Native Americans, with the Four Corners area there in the Grand Canyon area, you'll see that the cities match the places in the stars. The same thing is true there in Egypt, and the same thing is true here. The very first city represents that place in the Abzu, where everything began. And it goes further and further up the river. Remember, the Tigris and the Euphrates were created from the fresh waters of the Abzu and Tiamat with the encapsulating of chaos into this understandable form that could be conceived, and then chopping it up and creating order out of chaos. And so this was the laws of Me, which was handed down from Ea Enki, and then somehow or another Inanna, because Ea Enki gets drunk and she somehow steals the book of Me and the instructions to how to build civilization. And then she takes off and goes up to Nippur. And so civilization begins to evolve, and it becomes established in Nippur, or Nibiru, the city where these Sumerian tablets speak of that we all basically came from. Because you see, we came from Eridu, and then we came from Nibiru, and now we're here in Babylon, where everything is confused, which is even further north. And Zion, of course, is in the north, the city of the Grand King. So we're trying to get to a civilized order. We're trying to take the forest and all the wild animals and tame them and make a city-state which is somehow nicer to live, comfortable and easy and perfect. We want to make order out of chaos. So from the very first city, the tradition began where every day on December 25th, we would celebrate the birth of Marduk. And whatever king would be in your city-state or your government, he would be the ruler. And he would be a ruler because he was a little Marduk. He would be a new Marduk or a new Caesar. He would encompass all the qualities of Marduk. And how would he do that? Well, Marduk got rid of the chaos and made order and made civilization. And he got the tablet of Me handed down to him. So every one of the emperors received the instructions, received the ancient mysteries and the ancient wisdom. And they had to be intelligent and they had to be wise. And so every day on December 25th, you would take this king and you would strip him down until he was naked. And then you would take this thing that was kind of like a piece of leather or a glove or a strap that had a nail or a thorn in the end of it. And you would beat the king. Now, I suppose they didn't beat him too badly. They just smacked him a few times in this little drama that they played out every year. And they had asked the king, they would say, "What have you done to make order?" See, they would do this outside of the temple, outside of the walls. This is where Jesus, remember, was crucified, outside of the city walls on the hill of Golgotha. Because it was tradition to take the newly arrived king, born of the Virgin, to take him on the hill to the forest and ask him, "What have you done for us?" Right? And interrogate him. Well, on this great holiday, they would all go outside the city and they would take these statues, these little statues that they made of all the gods, and they would put them around in a little area and make a little drama, like we still do today on Christmas and Easter. Right? We have these little statues in our front yards, Mary and Joseph and the baby and little donkeys and little animals and stuff like that, and they all represent something. Well, today we've completely forgotten what we're doing here. But this is the nativity scene. This is the original drama of the gods and why he came and what we're doing. So they would ask this king, "All right, what have you done for us?" And he'd say, "Well, I have cleared all this land, and we've built houses and huts, and we've made irrigation, and we've done all this wonderful stuff. And we've made fruit trees and nut trees, and people are living much happier. We're making wine, and we got sheep, and we're shepherding the sheep." So they're like, "Oh, okay." So then they put his clothes back on, and he becomes emperor. Now, if they can't point to anything that he's done to make more order, to further the me, or the instructions of civilization, then they would literally beat him to death and send him to hell. Yeah, that's what they did to Jesus. They sent him to hell because they said, "Hey, Jesus, we want to know what you're going to do for us." There's only one problem. Jesus was not Marduk. Jesus was not embodying Marduk. Jesus was embodying NINGISHZIDA. The age-old system that Jehovah had, or Enki in the earth, where kings were built a civilization or a city or a state, and you were judged on how much civilization, how many laws you created and how much legislation you made and how many armies you had. That's not what Jesus wanted. Jesus wanted to bring us back to the true equilibrium, to that place of peace. Because you see, Enlil was his father, not Enki. The sky god, the heavenly god, his father was in heaven. And so he was the NINGISHZIDA who had the wings. And it was a different tradition, because NINGISHZIDA always fought with Marduk. Enlil always fought with Jehovah. Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau. Because remember, when Marduk defeated Tiamat, and he made this civilization out of her corpse, there was something very strange that he did. You see, because Tiamat, in order to wage war against mankind and all the gods, she got all her armies and dragons together, and she put venomous poison in their blood, and she made them ferocious and mean and crazy, and she found the craziest demon devil of all, and his name was Kingu. And she took Kingu and she says, "You're the head of my armies, and you're going to defeat the world." Well, when Marduk defeated Tiamat, he said, "I want to know who was the general of this army, because we're going to take that particular general and we're going to murder him, and with his blood we're going to make the humans." There's variations of this story, but humans are said to be made of the blood of a great demon. And this is why Enki understood that you couldn't really trust humans, because humans were different than the gods before them. Humans had something that was totally different, just like Marduk was totally different than the gods before him. Humans were even more different. Humans had the ability to deceive, to lie. No one else up to this point had this perfect mingling of deception as well as within them the spirit of the Abzu. They had both. They had equilibrium, and they had the ability to learn, to grow from their mistakes. You see, they needed time. They couldn't give them immortality right away. They needed to grow and learn by the things in which they suffered. And so, of course, Anu, wise Anu in the heavens, knew that he had to let this play out. He had to allow the waters of chaos to come flooding mankind. And he had to make sure that a boat was provided that saved us. And he had to make sure that we went through all of these ages and aeons and learned by the things in which we suffered. He had to let us enter into the body of Ea Enki, which became Marduk, and suffer and try to defeat the dragon, knowing that the government itself would be our downfall. Right? I mean, think about the word Kingu. Kingu was the leader of the armies of Tiamat, the armies of chaos, right? The beast, the governments of the world. And who leads the governments of the world? The king. And it's this very king that is destroying us and we have to get rid of. And this is why on Capitol Hill in Rome, Caesar refused to be made king. Because you see, Caesar was the beginning of democracy. And senators would go in and vote, and they were supposed to represent the people. But you see, we do not have a perfect union, a more perfect union yet. We're still waiting for the Christ to come to bring about perfect harmony between the chaos and the Abzu and the living waters. So, it then becomes very, very clear that Ea Enki is the god of the earth and the sea. And that Enlil was the god of the sky. We understand also that Zeus was the god of the sky. We understand that Enlil becomes Zeus, who is the supreme ruler of the universe from heaven. The other god, Ea Enki, is not the supreme ruler of the heavens, but he's only the supreme ruler of the earth and the Abzu. And wise Anu allowed the equilibrium to continue. You had to have some chaos, and you had to have some order, and you have to give man, the final creation, time to learn. But the one thing that Marduk had that was special, and it was something that had never been seen before, was consciousness. He had the vision and the ability to speak. He was conscious. But consciousness was not yet perfected, because this was the alter ego, or the I am. The alter, you've heard of the term, the alter ego? Everybody has an alter ego. And of course, the very first ego to be born is not one that is perfect. Because you see, the final ego, or the I am, is the Christ, that spiritual inner man that represents perfectly the Father's will. But that ego had not yet come. We still got to deal with Marduk, who ends up becoming a very rebellious god because of his ego, and very proud, and ends up with this huge war with Enlil. Enlil basically has to bring down nuclear weapons out of heaven to defeat this god Marduk. And we hear about this story in our Bible. It's called the Great Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's in the Sumerian tablets. And we find out it was more like a nuclear war. And it was because of the rebellion of Marduk, or the ego, which, remember, Marduk is his father, Ea. See, this is the story. A virgin gives birth, and this son, Dumuzi Adonis, Jehovah Adonai, he literally is the same person. Ea and Adonai, Ea and Dumuzi and Marduk are the same person. They're the ego. So this is why we have all throughout the Bible Jehovah seeming to fulfill the great stories about Marduk. He's the one who conquers the dragon, at least temporarily. He's the one, Jehovah, who takes down Leviathan, who's in the sea, who is Pharaoh, and then takes him to a wilderness so they can go round and around and around in rebirth. They got to go into the Jordan River and be baptized. They got to set up 12 stones at Gilgal, which is the wheel of rebirth. And we've got to go round and round. And this is not eternal perfection. Not yet. This is the ego. This is Marduk. This is Dumuzi. This is Adoni. So 434 times in the Bible, Yah is called Adoni. And it is not any mistake, friends. Just as I say, Theos in our New Testament is Zeus. And it's not like, oops, oh, well, let's just forget that. It can't really be Zeus, right? Our Father has got to be the Jewish God. No, he's not. You've got to follow the story. Zeus is the true God who is Enlil. Marduk is not the son of Enlil. He's the son of Ea Enki. And Marduk is the Dumuzi, the Adonai. So we're not talking anymore about speculation. We're dealing only with facts. I want to explain here in a moment how Yah was originally the god Ea. It's the same pronunciation, Ea, Yah. It's just they spell it with a Y-A-H in English, but it's just the same two syllables, Ea. And if you go back to the city there in Canaan, the city of Ebla, you'll see where this transformation of Ea into Yahu came about. But they also worshipped a god named El. And all throughout the Bible, you've got this god named El in the Hebrew Scriptures. Of course, Enlil later became known as Illel, or El. And so El is Enlil, and Yah is Yahu, or Yahweh. And they were the gods that were worshipped and understood in your Bible. So all the way through the Bible, you have the Elohim, which is all the gods, who create the heavens and the earth. You've got specifically El that does many things, who is also called El Elyon sometimes, because in those cases he probably was Enlil, who was the representative of Anu. And therefore he had a title. During those ages of time that the Bible speaks of, Enlil was always called the God Most High, the El Shaddai, the El Elyon, and therefore he was that El. But you also had another god, a brother of Enlil, who was also very powerful. He was his brother, but he represented the carnal nature, the trickster, the fleshly part. And so the Bible has both sides, and the Bible tells you both sides. The Bible explains in a very simple way how the flood came to be, because El decided to bring a flood, and Yahweh said, build an ark. And the Old Testament is very clear that it is Yahweh, by virtue of his son Marduk, because he calls himself Adonai all the time, but it is Ea Enki's reinvention as Marduk, where he kills the monster that is in the sea and brings down Pharaoh and makes the laws, or takes his me of civilization and begins to try and make order out of chaos. And so Yah is the god of the land and the sea, and Enlil is the god of the sky. So when Jesus came to earth, he says, your father, to the Jews, he says, your father is from beneath, the underworld. But he says, my father is from above, from heaven. My father is Pater Uranos. That is Anu, Father Anu. Or, meaning light, Anu, meaning heaven. The light in heaven is my father. So Jesus did not identify, when he was speaking in the Bible, he spoke as the Christ. He did not identify with his fleshly nature. The Apostle Paul says he came in the likeness of flesh to condemn the flesh. And he took on flesh as did his brethren, and he learned by the things in which he suffered. And in the genealogies of Jesus in the Bible, it says, this is Jesus, son of this person, son of Joseph, according to the flesh. But then it says he is the son of Theos, according to the Spirit. And so there his genealogy is different. So when he's speaking to his disciples and to all of us, he never speaks in the book of John with the identity of his flesh. The Apostle Paul says, we know no man after the flesh anymore, but we only know everyone after the Spirit, because we all have that inner spiritual man. And Jesus said, you must be born again. So Jesus is that double helix. He is both serpents Dumuzi and NINGISHZIDA. But he speaks only as NINGISHZIDA, as the Savior, as the one who rises up as Quetzalcoatl with his wings into heaven and says, I'll come back again and save you. I shall return. This is our Lord Christ. So Jesus, then, according to the flesh, may have been the son of Jehovah in that sense. And his father may have been Ea Enki in that sense, the flesh. Because everything that belongs to the flesh is flesh. But that which is spirit is spirit. And so, Jesus the Christ never identified with that, but always spoke in terms of the Christ. And in that sense, Jesus is not the son of Ea Enki, and he is not a Jew, but he is the son of a living divine light, who came down from his Father to teach us of the light, that his Father was love, and there is no darkness in him at all. He says, my Father is in heaven, and ye must pray in this manner, our Father who art in heaven. He did not teach us to pray or identify or to worship, which means to work, for the flesh and for mammon. Jesus was also a serpent. And it says, as Moses lifted up his serpent in the wilderness, so that whoever should look upon it should be saved. Okay, saved how? They weren't really saved. They went out in the desert and died again. So his serpent didn't do a lot of good. You know, you follow that serpent Inky, and you're not going to do a lot. You follow that copper serpent in the wilderness, you're not going to get far. But just as Moses lifted up his serpent in the wilderness, so Christ shall be lifted up on the cross and crucify his flesh, which is the serpent. Jesus had to come and embody the serpent and crucify it upon a cross. And he went down into hell as Dumuzi, and he came back out of there as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered flying serpent. He got his wings back, or NINGISHZIDA. This is the seraphim that surrounds the throne of our Father in heaven. It says, holy, holy, holy. He's got 6 wings, and there's 2 of them. That's right, there's 2 of these seraphs, or serpent. That's where the word comes from. And it's also the Serapis, that was the god that was worshipped in Egypt, which is the sun. And the 6 wings on each side. So each of the serpents go around the sun, and they have 6 wings, and each of those are the 6 houses that are on each side. Makes 12 houses go around the sun. These are the 2 serpents that guide the way to the throne, to Anu's throne, Irano, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father or Ano, who is the light from heaven. They guide the way because they speak the truth. That's that little DNA within your soul. That's that little voice that's within you that says you have to die in order to live. You've got to choose for yourself, and you've got to taste the bitter in order to enjoy the sweet. You don't even know what is good unless you've experienced bad. You must suffer as Jesus did. He learned by the things in which he suffered. And we all learn by the things we suffer. And so this is why the Bible says that we have gnosis of the true light. Jesus said to the Jews, your God Jehovah didn't give you manna from heaven. Oh, I know you think you ate manna from heaven, right? But he says you all ate that manna and died. You see, Moses gave you water from a rock, but the true water that you need is from my Father in heaven. The light will give you eternal life, and it's from me. I am the bread of life that come down from heaven. But you're still following Moses. You've got a veil over your mind, the Apostle Paul says. And every time you read the Torah, you don't understand that God represents the ego, the flesh. And when you're baptized into Moses and you try to keep all these laws, you're going to fail. You're going to go round and round and round. You're going to get to the River Jordan, and you're going to go down into the river and be baptized in the energies of this earth. And at the bottom of the river, there's going to be 12 stones, and you're going to set those up. Those stones are going to be called Gilgal, and that means the wheel of rebirth. You've got to go down into the waters, down into Egypt, and you've got to be born again. But along the way, you're going to have a God that's going to deceive you. You're going to have quite a few. The first one is going to be the Leviathan. The great Pharaoh, the great Leviathan's got 10 horns, and there were 10 gods that were in Egypt. And they were all gods like the frogs and the fly god and all these disgusting gods, right? They're demonic things like phobias and nymphs and whatever else. They're evil little gods. Of course, Moses tried to defeat them, and his serpent was thrown down and defeated that serpent. His dragon defeated that dragon, because you see, Enki-Ea was just another dragon, just another serpent. But he didn't truly defeat Pharaoh. And yes, Pharaoh's armies drowned in the sea, but now they were just in bondage to another god, another bondage, the law. So when we go down into the water, okay, we've got to be born again. Because there's 2 different resurrections. There's the resurrection unto judgment, where you just come back again to pay for what you've done. And then there's the resurrection to eternal life. And the only way you can do that is to have your eyes opened and eat from the tree of life and gain immortality, which is a free gift from our Father in heaven. You can't follow any laws. Moses can't save you. I'm sorry, friends, but that's not the right way. And that's not the right serpent. Anyway, friends, I'm rambling on here, and I'm looking down at the clock, and it's almost an hour I've been talking. So we're definitely going to do another video on this, at least 3. But I'm going to go ahead and close it here because we're getting close to an hour. And I think that's a good place to stop. Although there's so much more we're going to tell you in the next video. So please stay tuned. Watch the next video. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you guys have a really great day. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.